We are back discussing the White Lotus Season 2, Episode 2, which was titled Italian Dream, an episode that shines a light on materialistic items, and particularly money, and how characters like our married couple, Ethan and Harper, view money, as well as Lucia and Mia. We also learn a little bit about Bert's secret affairs back in the day, but speaking of secrets, we also learn about Greg's big secret. We'll be discussing that and so much more in today's spoiler review. But before we get into it, if you all haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. That way you all can stay up to date with all my White Lotus content. You can also give me a follow on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. All those links can be found in the description of this very video. Speaking of this video, if you all enjoyed today's breakdown and review, make sure you are giving this video a thumbs up. It helps out the channel a lot and I appreciate the support. You can also share this review to anyone and everyone you know that loves this show just as much as we do. But more importantly, let me know your thoughts in the comments on this second episode, with deep themes that you all take away, little Easter eggs that you all might have took away from this episode, favorite moments, least favorite moments, and share your theories in the comments below. With all that being out of the way, let's get into this week's breakdown. Full spoilers ahead as we open this week's episode with the very next day, as we see Ethan wakes up for a run. Meanwhile, Lucia, she is leaving Dom's room and she has a really quick, brief interaction with Ethan as they say good morning to each other. I don't think that's the last time that they're going to be interacting with each other in this season, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But as we go from them, I did find it to be very interesting to compare these shots here of one seeing Cameron and Daphne waking up in each other's arms, comparing that to Harper waking up alone. And I think that kind of speaks to how last week I felt as though Harper and Ethan, particularly Harper, can be a little bit judgmental, but they seem to be on a very good wavelength in their relationship. And I thought that Daphne and Cameron were maybe hiding their relationship, lying about how much they're in love. But now, after watching this episode, I think the roles have reversed. And I don't think that foundation of Harper and Ethan's relationship is as strong as I thought it was from last week. And back to Harper being by herself. I think that might be foreshadowing to them maybe by the end of this vacation, maybe not ending up home together, if not one of them end up dead. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but let me know what you all thought about that relationship shift. Did you always feel like Cameron and Daphne were as strong as, again, I think they've been married longer, but again, I was always under the assumption they were just put on the front, and they still may be, but I don't know, after this episode, I feel like their foundation is a lot stronger than we have with Ethan and Harper. But as I digress, getting back into this morning routine with Tanya, who's waking up to Greg, who's just kind of looking off in the distance. He seems to be kind of cold, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, is this him thinking about, man, my days are numbered, or is it have anything to do with his secret and his affairs? We'll get into Greg and his true intentions a little bit later, but see that the White Lotus employees are preparing for their day as they're taking orders from Valentina, who she just seems so miserable, right? She just seems like she seems to be one of those people that loves what she does and loves the position of power she has, but she doesn't love the people that she works with. At least that's what I'm getting from in these first two episodes. And I'm very curious to see if we'll spend more time with her as we did with Armand in season 1. But right now, she just seems to hate everyone. But let me know if you're more intrigued to learn a little bit more about Valentina as we move along. But as we get into the morning breakfast discussion, starting off with Tanya, Greg, and Portia, as they're heading out for breakfast, we see Portia sees them and she takes her place elsewhere, but we see that Greg definitely notices that she was there, and glad that she is there because Greg is headed back home, as we'll discuss later. But Tanya describes her perfect day to Greg, and unlike last week's episode where he was kind of talking about her eating habits, he agrees to share this perfect day with her because it's her day to shine, as she wants to portray the life of the actress Monica Vitti, who was known as the queen of Italian cinema, and she wants to go on this Vespa with Greg, and we see her choking while they're on the bike and all that, and we'll get to them a little bit later. But I want to go back to the emphasis and the theme and the focus of this episode, and particularly noticing these characters, again, materialistic things. And I'm going to shine a light on Tanya for a second here. You'll see how they use money and how they use money to make themselves feel better. As we learn out later in this episode, Tanya had a pretty dark past with her relationship with her father. And I'm thinking of this moment of like her recreating this perfect day, maybe to drown out all the negativity, the toxicity, the inappropriate relationship that her father had with her. And again, using money as kind of a scapegoat, using money to create this Italian dream. And we're going to have other examples throughout this episode, but I wanted to shine a light on Tanya, how she's using money and recreating another life that she wants to live with money. We'll get into those topics a little bit later, but I want to talk about that up top. But getting back to the breakdown, we see Portia sits with Albie, and I also forgot to mention last week that they definitely seem to probably going to have a romantic relationship, especially after that kiss at the end of this episode. But as we see, we have Dom and Bert arriving to breakfast, and we learn that the trip wasn't supposed to be a boys' trip, but instead a family trip. And I want to point out before we get into this breakdown with the Grasso family, the character that voiced Abby on the phone last week, a little fun fact, that was voiced by the incredible Lauren Dern. And listen, if Laura Dern appears in this episode or in this season somehow, like Dom manages to get his stuff together and she comes to celebrate this trip with her family, I would love that. But I didn't know if you all know that that was Laura Dern that was on the actual phone. But now getting into the minutia of this conversation here, we see that Bert says that Abby cannot do that, referring to them getting divorced since they've been married for over 25 years, which I'm thinking to myself, that's a very kind of old school mindset of Bert to be like, she can't do that. You're the man. You run this family. You make the decisions. As we learn a little bit more about Bert and his relationship and Dom's mom, as we find out that Bert lost his wife of 53 years of marriage, and this might be applying a little bit about that as I talked about this 3 generations of granddad, father and son. I think Dom might be a little bit embarrassed, man. He didn't even, he made it about halfway through the time that his father and his mom was married. And he might be like, man, I wasn't able to keep my stuff kind of hidden as well as my father did, as we'll talk about Bert and his affairs that he had for many years. So I found that conversation to be very interesting there and kind of seeing more of that dynamic between father and son. As we switch over to what's going on with Harper, who's hoping to eat alone this morning with her book, but she is spotted and waved down by Cameron and Daphne. As Cameron is yelling on the phone about his missing luggage, we see Daphne telling Harper that they never fight because they are always on the same page. And as we see, Cameron says to his wife,
happy wife, happy life.
what are they hiding? What are their true intentions? Do they beat each other up in the middle of the night? Kind of like Big Little Lies and Alexander Skarsgård and Nicole Kidman's relationship. But no, we find out why they are as loving as they are a little bit later in this breakdown. But we see Harper is just hating all this interaction here. Meanwhile, we catch up to Ethan after his morning run, thinking he's having some alone time with himself and his laptop, as Harper walks in on him and they discuss why he's pleasuring himself, as we learn as an audience that Harper isn't into morning sex. This is one of many examples of them not being on the same page. As she tells him about her discovery of Daphne and Cameron never fighting, Ethan makes up a good point. He brings up that Harper may be threatened by them, and Harper tells him that she fears that this is going to be their future, having friends like Cameron and Daphne, and thinks that they are talking about her. Meanwhile, we see them picking out new clothes for Cam and just living their life, which, going back to that discussion, a couple things there. Number one, sex isn't everything in a relationship, right? As someone a long-term relationship, it's not the most, at least for me, it's not the most important thing. It's something that you want to have a part of your repertoire and your tool belt as far as resources and being able to sync with your partner, but it's not a top priority, as we can kind of see that in the relationship between Ethan and Harper. But I think they're starting to realize, like, man, maybe this is one of many other things that we're not on the same page with. They seem to share the same political opinions and share the same intellectual things about book reading and kind of being knowledgeable about what's going on in the world. But what about other things? What about their hobbies, their interests, their sexual preferences? So that definitely is one of many examples to show that they're just not as maybe compatible. So we'll get to that a little bit later. But again, comparing that to Cam and Daphne, they're having a good time. They're shopping for clothes. Again, he just learned that he's not going to have his luggage this whole time. But they're just like, you know what? Let's try to make the best. Yeah, he was upset, which anyone would be upset. But they're just trying to find a plan B. Let's live life. Because again, we learn something a little bit later that makes them value life a little bit differently, which we'll get into a little bit later. But let me know your thoughts again on this dynamic between these relationships and how you feel about it. As we move on to our next moments here, catching up to what's going on with Mia and Lucia, we see that Lucia tells Mia about her night with Dom, and she's going to be his girlfriend for the week, as Dom makes up this lie to spend some time with them briefly to kind of get their day started, as Dom informs Valentina that his new friends will be frequently stopping in every so often, more so at nighttime, which I found this moment here to be so funny, as we get Valentina adding her 2 cents of them coming and going. It makes up the whole situation so difficult. She's like, wait, she's going to be in your room and you're going to have this other woman sleeping with your father? I thought that moment was very funny, because he's like, no, you're putting words in my mouth. I just want this to be as simple as possible. It's like, you know what's going on here, Valentina, but she's just really kind of drawing it out and making it as awkward as possible, which I really love this moment here, as we see Dom trying to set some rules for Lucia. But the moment that I really got a good kick out of is Lucia talking to Valentina and saying, hey, this transaction going on here is good for business, right? She kind of says that the hotels are built off the backs of people like Lucia. So I got to say right now, as far as favorite characters so far in these 2 episodes, I really like Lucia. I like just her spunk, her personality, and she really gets more time to shine this episode. So let me know, 2 episodes in, who are some of your favorite characters so far? I'm really a big fan of Lucia and Mia, and just their banter so far has been really kind of entertaining. But immediately see them breaking those rules that Dom gave them as they're spending and splurging in the store, which brings me back to the point I mentioned at the top of this review here. I believe the focus of this episode was showing materialistic items and how our characters value money, or in the case of Mia and Lucia, they might not have this type of money on them regularly. So we're seeing them splurging. We're seeing them having the Italian dream. We're seeing them allowing money to kind of control their day and to live up the life, right? So again, this is another example of the theme of this episode being materialistic items, and particularly how money shapes these characters, or when people don't have money, how they act when they finally have it in their hand. They just spend it as quickly as they got it. So I thought that was a really interesting kind of tidbit showing the thesis and kind of the emphasis of this particular episode. But we're going to catch up with them a little bit later. Time to check in with the married couples, Harper and Ethan, and Cameron and Daphne. And again, the materialistic conversation is brought up as we see them having this, which I've always been told growing up, you don't bring up certain things around people as far as like topics like religion and politics and people's finances. But again, I'm not rich. Maybe rich people ask people, hey,
How'd you guys like being rich?
As we see, Ethan tells them that he appreciates being able to help people. For example, helping Harper's parents, helping his sister, and we learn that Harper wants to start a foundation. So again, I'm like, it's just kind of not rude, but it's kind of inappropriate to ask someone. But again, knowing that Cameron and Ethan are friends, this isn't like complete strangers, so it's just a little bit of banter. But even my friends, I wouldn't ask them how does it feel to be rich? Or maybe I would if we had a couple drinks. But let me know what you all thought about that topic. But in particularly going back to that scene, this is very important. We see Daphne brings up how she spends all her money when she's had too much wine, and she spends it on charities. And to me, again, it's a very interesting way that she says that in regards to she spends money when she gets drunk, and she spends it in a way that helps people, helps children and animals and stuff like that. But it doesn't have a purpose, right? It isn't as purposeful as we see from Harper wanting to build a foundation to help out kids. Hers is just kind of like, oh, okay, I see something on TikTok or Twitter or one of those infomercials, I'll just give them all the money in the world. But it doesn't have any purpose to it. And that's the conversation that I want to have here in regards to the way people use money. Very intentional with someone that just came about money with Ethan and Harper versus the other way around with Cameron and Daphne. It's just kind of like, when she's not drunk, does she spend money on charity? I don't believe so. But again, just a very fascinating conversation to talk about those two characters. And again, how people value money is a very key thing. But we see Cameron takes a swing at Harper thinking that they're pigs, which she denies that claim. And she goes out for a swim, and we get another awkward conversation in a very awkward situation between these two characters. Let's break down this scene here as we see them swimming in the water, and Cameron makes it very important that she likes him, and not just him and Daphne, but him in particular. And again, we go from that awkward scene to last week, him undressing in front of her. I have a thought that someone mentioned in the comics last week that we'll talk about a little bit later, but I think her liking Cameron, but also Daphne, will be very important for some sexual moments between those three a little bit later. But again, pay attention to those little, little Easter eggs, these little things, these little nuggets that he's throwing at her. I think it's very important for the future of these characters. As we get back into it here with the Grasso family, Bert, Dom, and Albie, we see Bert really wishes that his granddaughter was with them, as he couldn't imagine what Dom could have possibly did, as he compares to what's going on with Greek mythology, and particularly Hades and his, I don't want to say the word, but because it's a YouTube red flag, but his assault. And he's comparing that to what Dom could have personally or potentially did to have his wife of 25 years divorce him. I started to think, the way that Bert, he kept saying, Hades and assault. I wonder that Dom, when it comes to his sexual urges that he had, do we think he assaulted someone and he kind of paid it off, or had a civil situation, or if it was just consensual and it was just he did it so many times, he's a sex addict. So I'm very curious on what exactly, besides cheating on his wife, was there more to the cheating than what could be alluded to. Let me know your thoughts on that and how Bert just kept saying what the Greek mythology Hades did. I thought that was very interesting. But you're now transitioning to the nighttime sequences, and starting off with Lucia and Mia as they're all dressed up to impress. We see Mia gets her moment to shine as she's singing with the guy from the piano last week, and she lets him know that she isn't a prostitute. And I'm going to be honest with you all, she sounded amazing. She sounded really good. I kind of got not emotional, but I was very engrossed into her moments in her performance, and her vocals were just very on point. But pay attention to what she's singing about. I found it very interesting that she is saying the best things in life are free. And the reason I say that's interesting, because we just saw them scenes ago spending all the money in the world. Again, if the best things in life are free, then why are you spending all this money on yourself? Why aren't you, giving it to charity, or saving it, or giving it to people in need? So again, I just found that so interesting. Again, the valuing of money, which is so interesting in this episode, as we cut to what's going on with Albie and Portia, who are out at dinner, and out of all the places in the world, so be had that Tanya and Greg show up for a time to eat. As we transition to the dinner conversations and the kids, are you going to have kids come up, as Daphne mentions if Harper and Ethan will be having kids, which they want to eventually. But then again, we get into these awkward conversations. And again, I guess it's just Ethan and Cam, they know each other. So he's like, yeah, we want to have kids, but our sex schedule isn't synced. I like to have morning sex. She has like to have sex at night. And we can never really find that time to have a family being created, which I'm like, who brings that up at dinner tables? Again, when I was in a really close relationship, you have friends and you share certain things. But I'm just who talks about that? But again, I digress. As I have a really earnest moment between Cameron and Daphne. He talks about when they had their last kid and the fact that they almost lost their newborn, also almost lost his wife, and it really reshaped his value of life, right? And it was just kind of a great moment. The acting was on point. It wasn't over the top. The music wasn't kind of over drowning the scene. It was just a really earnest, honest moment. And the thing that I really took away from that moment was pay attention to the response that Harper has, right? If you look at Harper, it's almost like she's saying in her head, shit, this is an actual real moment. And she's coming face to face with, these aren't fake people. They're real people. They have real life problems just like me. And they face something that can really shape their reality and shape their relationship and the foundation and how they view life. Cameron almost lost his wife and almost lost their newborn child. And now when we see them, they're enjoying life. They're cherishing life. They're splurging if they have to. They have to buy new clothes because just like that, life can be taken away from you. So not only did she get a kind of revelation, but also for me as an audience, I'm like, that makes more sense to why they're acting so kind of free-flowing and so free-spirited, because again, life could have just been gone just like that. So let me know what you all thought of that sequence. And now, do you view Daphne and Cameron a little bit differently. Let's talk about that in the comment section. But as we get back into the truth comes out about Bert. This whole time I'm thinking Bert seems like a good old grandpa who sometimes falls and trips. He sometimes farts, but with Albie not around, he comes clean to his son. It's not that Dom's problem was that he was having affairs. It was that he was sloppy and he didn't keep it tight. As we learn, Bert had his own affairs. As he talks about, they were just kind of side pieces and peccadillos as he mentions. But again, Bert put it on this front, man. Again, this good old grandpa. This seems to be a good old guy. But, you know, those 53 years with his married wife, he had his own affairs, which again, the apple doesn't fall too far away from the tree as we see between Bert and Dom. But I love this shot here where Dom is mirrored in the wall and we see one side maybe showing him wanting to change, wanting to fight for his family, but the other side shows his sexual urges. And then it isn't a coincidence that he looks up and who's right there? Lucia. I love that shot. And again, the duality of the character, fight for my family or I'm a man and I got to get those urges out. I really love that shot there. Let me know what you thought about that. But we hear from Albie. He is the peacemaker of the family and he is the nice guy, which explains why he's on this trip with his father. He doesn't want to be like his father. While we get a little bit more insight on Portia, who just wants to live life and wants to separate herself from the screen and just want to live on the edge, which to me, it sounds like a perfect match, right? They say opposite attracts, and I think again by this episode when they kiss, this might be a relationship that we see for the rest of the season. And again, we hear Albie talk about his kind of weakness. His kryptonite is he falls for wounded birds. So again, I'm very curious on what that line means. And we also learn about Portia that she's on medication and she says she wants to up her medication. I don't know if that's foreshadowing to be one of those victims in what we saw in the opening of this new season. Let me know your thoughts on this. Maybe perfect match or a match meant for disaster. Let's talk about that in the comment section. But as we move on, we finally learn why Greg was whispering on the phone and being weird at the start of this episode, as Greg has to fly back to Denver to go to work for 2 to 3 days. Tanya wants him to quit his BLM, as Greg brings up that he doesn't want to quit because Tanya just dropped things so easily, and we see them have a fight and she literally is yelling at him saying, "You're a piece of shit and I don't like you. You don't like me," and this, that, and the other. I'm like, they're fighting like a bunch of teenagers because they fell in love like a bunch of teenagers. They just met each other and he put his game on her, which we'll talk about what he's really up to, and she just kind of fell for it. But again, it speaks back to what we learned about Tanya in this episode. She might have her own kind of habits, bad habits, or falling into men that aren't really good for her. So I think there's just so much character development that I love within this episode as we transition into learning a little bit about Tanya, as we see Portia tells Albie about her father being super rich and owning half of San Francisco, and that there may have been a very inappropriate relationship that he had with his daughter, which again, it explains so much about Tanya in regards to, you hear people that were maybe affected by an adult when they were a kid and how they grew up and they pin all that tragedy and they pin all that inside of them, and then they end up sometimes reflecting in reality and end up dating people that aren't good for them or dating people that reminds them of that person that affected them. So it speaks a lot, man, to Tanya's personality and just kind of how she dropped things, because maybe that's just like her coping mechanism. She tries to get close to people and they fail her. They let her down. They do something bad to her. So that just, again, this show is funny and all that stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that I pulled away from this episode that I really enjoyed. Again, the character development, it was subtle and it was really well woven into this week's episode. Again, I thought this episode was fantastic if you all haven't told. But let's get into some more details as Portia and Albie share a very awkward kiss. And you can tell based on the conversation at dinner, as she wants to live on the edge and just kind of separate herself from the screens and Bumble and TikTok. She probably wanted him to come in the bedroom to have a little bit of a nightcap, right? But we know Albie's the good guy. He's maybe playing hard to get. He might be a player on his own, right? It might be a little bit like his dad and just put it on a facade like his grandfather and his father. But again, very interesting to see this relationship develop over time. But let's wrap up the breakdown of the episode as we see Harper promises to be super fun for the remaining time on this trip, as she wants to have a little bit more fun and do some of those activities that Ethan sees on his favorite websites. But remember, Ethan's a night guy. He declines her, and we can see that look of disappointment in her face. Again, they're not on the same page, y'all. They are not on the same page. They might find other ways to find themselves to be pleasured, if you know what I mean, which we'll get into that here. We see Cam and Daphne definitely talking shit about Harper, but you can't blame them. Harper has been a little bit, well, not a little bit, she's been very judgmental of them. So I don't blame them talking stuff about Harper. Example of Daphne obsession with murder as she talks to her husband about, sometimes wife put their husband's balls in a casket or in a bag, and she, they kiss and hook up and says, I can do the same for you. I'm telling y'all, man, Daphne has an obsession with pain and torture and murder. Keep an eye on her. But I want you all to notice something in regards to, again, the violent Easter eggs. But more interesting, I'm going to pull it up on the screen here. There was a very interesting shot of them emphasizing the door that separates the couples. I'd be surprised if Daphne, Cameron, and Harper have a threesome. It's not a coincidence that they talked about their rooms connecting, and who was the person that said, we're not going to use that? It was Harper. And who's disappointed by not getting her sexual, cup filled tonight in this episode? It was Harper. And who seems to be a little bit more free-flowing and free-spirited in their relationship? I don't know, guys. I think we might be seeing a 3-way coming pretty soon. Let me know your thoughts on that. But as we wrap it up, Lucia has arrived to Dom's room, and she's pointing out that he wants to change. And he says he's a sexual addict, man. But Lucia, she has her friend Mia there, and he cannot resist. I don't blame him, man. I do not blame him at that moment. As Bert is watching The Godfather while he's listening to his son having a nightcap. Remember the theme of this episode, materialistic items, and how the best things in life are free, and we're seeing them in this private pool popping champagne. And even Mia, who we learned last week, doesn't want to get in a relationship. She doesn't want to be sleeping with anyone, but now she's just having fun, right? And just living her life. But again, it goes back to what money can do to people, for better or for worse. Materialistic things, taking advantage of them, living their lavish lifestyle. I don't think Mia would ever do this in regular circumstances, but again, a little bit of money, a little bit of champagne can change a person. But let's talk about this last sequence here, which is very interesting, as we end with Craig on the phone while Tanya is listening to him whispering, talking about she's clueless as usual and he'll be back home soon, and he loves the person whoever he was on the phone with. So wait a minute, you're telling me that might have been his girlfriend or his wife on the phone that he's saying, I love you and I'll be home tomorrow. Was this all a spam? Was this all a part of some kind of thing that he does? Does he do this on the regular? He meets kind of older women who have a bunch of money, seems desperate, seems like they want to be in a relationship with anyone like that, and falls in love and marries them within a couple days. Is this something that he does? Did he case her out? Did he watch her for a couple days and just make his decision? Oh my goodness, does he want her for her money? Because he mentions the prenup a little bit earlier. And again, remember the theme. Money changes people. Greg is for that money now and trying to get it from his wife potentially. Man, that is a big moment. And what will Tanya do? Will she act out of character and maybe take a page out of Delilah's book and kill her husband? Or will she just brush her under the rug because maybe that's something she's been through before with what we learned with her father and just kind of suppressing her trauma and pain? I guess we'll have to find out next week. So overall, y'all, I thought this episode was fantastic. The performances were great. Spending more time with Lucia and Mia and Maya, and seeing that side of what money can do to people that don't have it normally, as well as Ethan and Harper and them coming up on money recently and how they spend money or value money, and also the relationship being kind of on rocky terms. Delilah and Cam, they're just like us. They're regular people that have suffered tragedies and now they want to live life to the fullest. But they might be having a 3-way, someone entering the relationship pretty soon. And of course, the young love that we have between what's going on with Albie and Portia. Great episode, y'all. But hey, I've been here talking this whole time. Go ahead and let me know in the comments your pros, your cons, the themes you took away from the episode. Who's your favorite character so far? What are you loving? What are you not enjoying about this show so far? Let's have those discussions in the comments. If you stuck around to this point in review, I appreciate you. Do me a favor. put in the comments right now, hashtag the best things in life are free. I appreciate you all. I hope you had a good time in today's breakdown, because I certainly did. Before you all leave, if you haven't already, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. That way you don't miss out on any of my White Lotus contents, any of my other TV reviews or movie reviews or short form content that I have on the channel. Hope you all had a good time. Hope you're staying safe. As you all can see on the screen now, come and join the community. Check out my other reviews for the White Lotus. Check out my most recent review, and we'll catch you all on the next breakdown.